Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're going to dig into the geography of a place that's not just a country, but a major player on the world stage, India. Its location has literally shaped its entire story.
Yeah, that's a pretty big statement, right? And, to really get a grip on India's massive role in history and where it's headed, we've got to start with the basics. It's geography. So, let's get our bearings.
All right, so here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll find India on the map. Then we'll get a sense of its incredible scale. We'll even tackle a cool little time puzzle. And finally, we'll see why its spot on the globe makes it a major crossroads, both for the world and its own neighbors.
Okay, so first things first. Let's start with the absolute basics. Where exactly is India on the globe?
Okay, this is the first thing you absolutely need to know. Imagine splitting the Earth right at the equator. India is completely 100% in the northern hemisphere. And this one simple fact, it has a huge impact on everything from the weather to how it's connected with the rest of the world throughout history.
Now, I know these numbers might look a little technical, but trust me, they tell an incredible story. Look at that span. The country stretches across almost 30 degrees of latitude and longitude. That's massive. And we're not just talking about a big piece of land here. This vast expanse is the reason you see such an amazing mix of climates and cultures all in one place.
And cutting right through the middle of all that is the Tropic of Cancer. Now, this isn't just some imaginary line on a map. Think of it as a real climatic dividing line. It's what basically splits the country in two, giving you a warm tropical south and a more temperate subtropical north.
Okay, so we know where it is. Now let's talk about just how big it is. And really, you can't understand India's personality without getting a handle on its enormous size.
Get this, 3.28 million square kilometers. That's such a huge number, it's kind of hard to even wrap your head around it, right? But just think of this immense landmass as the giant canvas where India's entire story is painted.
But to really put that massive number into perspective, let's zoom out. All that land, it makes up about 2.4% of the world's total land area. Now, that might sound like a small slice of the global pie, but believe me, it packs an incredible amount into that space.
And that 2.4% puts India in some pretty impressive company. It makes it the 7th largest country on the entire planet, right up there with giants like Russia, Canada, and China.
So you've got this vast area, and it's defined by two huge borders. First, there's a land boundary that's over 15,000 kilometers long. And then there's this incredibly long coastline. We're talking over 7,500 kilometers if you include the islands. And that coastline, we're going to see in just a minute why it's so important.
All right, now here's where things get really interesting. When you have a country this wide, it creates a pretty fascinating puzzle, all about time.
Just think about this for a second. If you're on the far western edge in Gujarat and someone else is on the far eastern tip in Arunachal Pradesh, there's a 2-hour difference in when the sun rises. So the sun can be fully up in the east while it's still pitch black in the west. Kind of wild, right?
So that leads to a really obvious question. How does a country that wide keep everyone on the same clock? I mean, how do you manage trains, flights, or even just scheduling a meeting without total chaos?
Well, the answer is actually a really clever bit of geographical magic. It's called the Standard Meridian of India. It's basically an imaginary line that runs right down the middle of the country, and the whole nation sets its clocks to that line. It's a perfect compromise that gets everyone, from the Far East to the Far West, on the exact same page with a single Indian Standard Time.
So all this stuff about location and size, it's not just a bunch of facts for a trivia night. It all comes together to give India a really unique and, honestly, a very powerful spot on the world stage. And this is where geography turns into straight-up strategy. Look at how the Indian landmass acts like this giant natural bridge. That peninsula, the Deccan Peninsula, sticks right out into the Indian Ocean. What that does is put it dead center of the major sea routes that connect Europe all the way to East Asia. And this prime real estate became even more important back in 1869. That's when the Suez Canal opened, and suddenly, the trip by sea from India to Europe got shorter by a whopping 7,000 kilometers. That just supercharged trade and locked in India's role as a major global hub.
And for thousands of years, this has been a two-way street. The trade routes, both on land and sea, weren't just for moving goods like spices and fancy fabrics. They were also highways for incredible ideas, like the epic stories of the Ramayana, the decimal system, and the very numerals we use today, all flowing out from India to the world.
But it wasn't just a one-way street. Ideas from other great cultures flowed right back in along those same routes. And you can still see the evidence today. Things like the influence of Greek sculpture, or the famous domes and minarets that came from West Asia and became a signature part of the country's architecture.
Okay, so we've seen the big global picture. For our last point, let's zoom back in a bit and look at how all this geography shapes India's relationships with the countries right next door.
India is literally woven into its neighborhood by a really complex web of borders. You've got these huge land borders to the northwest, north, and east. And then if you look south across the water, you've got its island neighbors, Sri Lanka and the Maldives.
So when you put it all together, the massive size, that central location, and all those shared borders, it means India's position is more than just important on a world scale. It's really the undeniable geographical anchor for the entire region of South Asia.
And that kind of leaves us with one final big thought to chew on. We've seen how India's unique spot on the map has shaped thousands of years of its history, everything from ancient trade routes to how it tells time today. So the real question becomes, how is this timeless landscape, with its incredible size, its critical location, and its complex borders, going to define its story in the century ahead?